when you're having a baby, there's a lot on your mind. At Northwell's Staten Island University Hospital, you can rest easy with our reimagined labor and delivery experience. Our new Grapuso Women and Newborn Center provides private suites, overnight accommodations for a loved one, and a top-level NICU, all powered by the team that cares for the most moms and babies in New York. It's care made for Staten Island and made for you. Visit northwell.edu/newbaby. Staten Island University Hospital. Raise health.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. When you visit the doctor, you probably hand over your insurance, your ID, and contact details. It's just one of the many places that has your personal info. And if any of them accidentally expose it, you could be at risk for identity theft. LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second. If you become a victim, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You are now entering the Stone Zone. Well, we found out that Hillary Rotten Clinton actually signed off on the plan hatched by her top campaign advisors to smear then-candidate Donald Trump with false claims of Russian collusion, and also to distract from her own mounting legal problems regarding the illicit illegal email server she was using during the 2016 campaign. All of this is according to explosive intelligence files that were declassified Thursday by Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence. The 24-page intelligence annex was compiled from memos and emails obtained by the Obama administration in the lead-up to Election Day that laid out the confidential conversations between leaders of the Democrat National Committee, including then-Chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz, she's kind of like every man's first wife, and liberal billionaire George Soros, who was interfering in American politics through his Open Society Foundation. The plot, now laid bare by Tulsi Gabbard, was the brainchild of the Clinton campaign's then foreign policy advisor Julianne Smith, including, and I quote, raising the theme of Putin's support for Trump and, quote, subsequently steering public opinion towards the notion that it needs to equate to the Russian leader's political influence campaign with actual hacking of the election infrastructure. We now know that this has no basis in fact whatsoever. The entire Russian collusion hoax was cooked up by Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, who green-lighted it in an Oval Office meeting, Vice President Joe Biden, who helpfully suggested perhaps we could charge General Michael Flynn with violations of the Logan Act, John Brennan, the disgraced CIA director, who we now know, based on these declassified documents, actually forced the use of the Steele dossier to be included in the intelligence briefing for President Barack Obama. You see, that created the rationale for them to launch the FBI investigation, also known as Crossfire Hurricane. They also used it as the rationale for the appointment of Robert Mueller, Silent Bob. We now know why he was silent when he testified to Congress about the final results of his investigation. It was very clear that Mueller was non compos mentis. He was around the bend. When he was asked whether he was familiar with Fusion GPS, that's the company that set up the meeting in Trump Tower with Donald Trump Jr. that was supposed to be the handoff of damaging information about Hillary Clinton, but turned out to be nothing of the sort. He had said he'd never heard of Fusion GPS. When he was asked whether he knew that the woman who was the chief prosecutor in my case, Jeannie Rhee, had also represented Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation, a very clear conflict of interest because I had written extensively about the Clinton Foundation and its corruption, Mueller said he was unfamiliar with that. They failed to mention that Jeannie Rhee was Mueller's law partner and the Clinton Foundation was a client of their firm. But Robert Mueller didn't know that. No, it's all coming home to roost now, and there's more coming. Very clearly, sources tell me that the next bombshell is going to be absolute proof by declassification of documents that the 2020 election was rigged with the assistance of 2 of our intelligence agencies. So when you hear that in the next 48 hours, remember that you heard it here first. Meanwhile, the former CIA director, John Brennan, the guy who we learned through these declassified documents just days ago, forced the inclusion of the fake Steele dossier. That's the report that was fabricated and paid for by Hillary Clinton that claimed that Donald Trump had frolicked with Russian prostitutes when he visited Moscow as a private businessman. Brennan is still trying to salvage his greatly damaged reputation. He appeared on MSNBC, where else, on Thursday morning to do some damage control, as the Trump administration releases are exposing the entire Russian collusion hoax and Brennan's own role. Brennan on this show insisted the Steele dossier paid for Hillary, quote, played no role in the intelligence assessment report. The problem is that that is a lie. It's proven by all of the declassified documents released by Tulsi Gabbard. But he still, 3 days ago, I watched him on MSNBC, he was saying, well, the Steele dossier, quote, might be true. This is outrageous because the man has continued to push a lie that hampered Donald Trump's presidency for the first 3 years of his term. CIA Director John Ratcliffe recently announced that a new CIA report had revealed that FBI Director James Comey, CIA Director John Brennan, and the Director of National Intelligence James Clapper worked together to purposely corrupt the Trump-Russia investigation in 2016 before Trump even entered the office. The 3 corrupt Obama officials included the Steele dossier, as I said, in their quest to screw Trump, their words, knowing at the time that it was a lie and a fraud. MSNBC asked Brennan about the new Russiagate documents and the DOJ strike force team that's being assembled to investigate the hoax and hopefully prosecute those responsible. Brennan looked pretty nervous to me. He said, putting together an internal strike force to take a look at this information is certainly understandable. But I also like to think that professionals at the Department of Justice will dismiss any of these criminal referrals because they are baseless, because they really are. This guy is whistling past the graveyard, folks. I think he's going down. I pray that he's going down. I saw what he did to General Michael Flynn. I know what he tried to do to me and my family. And above all, I saw what they tried to do to Donald Trump. Either we have a 2-tier justice system in which everyone is treated equally, or we have a 1-tier justice system in which liberal Democrats and their compatriots and co-conspirators and Confederates aren't held responsible when they act illegally. In this case, this is seditious conspiracy. This is treasonous, and someone has to be held responsible. Meanwhile, Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas has exposed himself as the neocon traitor that he is, desperately now trying to undermine Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard and once again protect the deep state. I'm a little surprised because Senator Cotton strongly supported the nomination of Tulsi Gabbard to the position of Director of National Intelligence, voted for her confirmation both in committee and on the Senate floor. But reports that Cotton has now put forward legislation that would essentially hamstring Gabbard in her new role as the Director of National Intelligence and prevent her from releasing documents that paint deep state entities into a negative light. This is being sent to you, masquerading to the American people as a cost-cutting bill. But the truth is, it takes away the declassification authority from the Director of National Intelligence and gives it to the FBI and the NSA. Now, both the FBI and the national security apparatus were the exact people who invented and fabricated the Russian collusion hoax and then hid it from the American people. So this, I think, is really extraordinarily dangerous. That's why I believe that Cotton needs a primary challenger, and I will be supporting whoever steps up and challenges him. Cotton is a vestige of the Bush-era neocon Republican Party, and frankly, it's just time for him to go away. He is not someone who believes in Trump's America First Republican Party, and this attempt to undermine Tulsi Gabbard, I think it is outrageous. Meanwhile, as I say, the declassified annex from the 2023 report by Special Counsel John Durham was released today. This is the exact document or documents that FBI Director Kash Patel found in a burn bag in a locked room at the FBI headquarters, meaning they were on the verge of destroying this absolute proof that Hillary Clinton and her Confederates were all involved in a scheme devised by her campaign's senior advisors to smear Trump by publicly raising the theme of Putin's support for Trump. We, of course, know that there was no support for Donald Trump. Senator Chuck Grassley said in his response to this new report, based on the Durham Annex, the Obama FBI failed to adequately review and investigate intelligence reports showing the Clinton campaign may have been ginning up the fake Trump-Russia narrative for Clinton's political gain, which is ultimately done through the Steele dossier and other means. These declassified reports showed that the Trump-Russia scandal was promulgated from the very beginning. Now, many of us who intently followed this nonsense or were embroiled in it, as I was, knew from the beginning that it was bogus. In my case, I was never summoned to the grand jury. I was never sent a target letter. I sat with my lawyers knowing that there was no Russian collusion and knowing that I had violated no law. Yet Andrew Weissman, the de facto head of the Mueller investigation, perhaps the most corrupt prosecutor in U.S. history, would regularly leak on an almost weekly basis these stories meant to pressure me. Stone in Mueller's crosshairs. Mueller intensifies focus on Roger Stone. It is outrageous that after I was pardoned, Weissman and Rosenstein, the acting attorney general, both said Stone can still be called before a grand jury. They had 3 years to call me before a grand jury, but they never did so. That's because I did nothing wrong. These new documents are only available because Tulsi Gabbard has followed the directive of Donald Trump to get to the bottom, and now she tells us that she's declassified even more explosive documents showing a 6-year fight with a whistleblower in the intelligence community to reveal the Russiagate collusion hoax. Gabbard said the whistleblower risked everything to expose a scandal that subverted our democracy, and that the whistleblower within the FBI was threatened by a supervisor in an attempt to keep them quiet. At the same time, the whistleblower was promised a promotion if they would simply lie and support the false and now discredited Steele dossier. Documents reveal that Obama's Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, and others in Obama's inner circle spoke loudly about the dubiousness of the Steele dossier, but they still allowed it to be used by the intelligence community to fuel the Russian collusion hoax. I admire the courage and patriotism of the intelligence community whistleblower who exhausted every avenue to try to expose this hoax, even reaching out to Special Counsel John Durham, who was charged with investigating how the hoax began. The whistleblower also reached out to at least one U.S. senator, but strangely enough, neither one of them ever responded. I'm Roger Stone. You're in the Stone Zone. We're bringing you breaking news. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
When you're having a baby, there's a lot on your mind. At Northwell's Staten Island University Hospital, you can rest easy with our reimagined labor and delivery experience. Our new Grapuso Women and Newborn Center provides private suites, overnight accommodations for a loved one, and a top-level NICU, all powered by the team that cares for the most moms and babies in New York. It's care made for Staten Island and made for you. Visit northwell.edu/new baby. Staten Island University Hospital. Raise health.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Stone Zone. Pardon me if I can't stop talking about the fact that the Russian collusion hoax, which dominated our politics for 3.5 years, the Russian collusion hoax, which caused my wife and I to lose our home, our savings, our insurance, even my ability to make a living, because for 2 years I was gagged unconstitutionally by a federal judge. I couldn't comment even to defend myself in any medium whatsoever. So now that this is all proven to be a fraud, I have to reiterate, most people don't realize this, I was convicted of lying under oath about things that never happened. In other words, I had no motive to lie. To violate the False Statements Act, your false statement has to be both willful, and here's the key, it also has to be material, meaning you have to be lying to cover up some other underlying crime. The judge wagged her finger at me in a 55-minute harangue at my sentencing, in which she said, and I quote, "You have been convicted of covering up for Donald Trump." To which I say, covering up what? The Russian collusion hoax? No, Judge Amy Berman Jackson violated my constitutional right in every single one of her pre-trial motions. So, for example, I was not allowed to raise the question of corruption by the special counsel, by the Department of Justice, by the FBI, or by any member of Congress. But the Constitution says, in a case called Kiles v. Whitley, that the integrity of the investigation and an indictment is always grounds for criminal defense. Judge Amy Berman Jackson has articles of impeachment being worked on in the U.S. House of Representatives today. Her handling of the Paul Manafort case, her handling of my case, and her handling of the case against Hillary Clinton on the question of those brave Americans killed in Benghazi, all present grounds for her removal from the federal bench. Whether the votes are necessary in the Senate to impeach her is unclear, but at a minimum, House Republicans need to send the good judge a subpoena that allows her to come up to Capitol Hill and explain a number of her decisions. This woman terrorized me. She doesn't seem to believe that federal judges can be criticized in our system. She was very distraught that both Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones, both friends of mine, criticized the biased and political nature of the way she conducted my trial. Then, of course, you may remember, we learned that the jury forewoman, who said during jury selection and during the trial that she didn't know who I was and had never heard of me, had been attacking me on her social media, Facebook and Twitter, but she had those posts on a private setting so that my lawyers could not see them. The judge rejected the idea that that was proof of bias and denied me a new trial. No, I won't be satisfied until Judge Jackson is held accountable for the violations of the Constitution that she's responsible for. I'm Roger Stone. You're in the Stone Zone. We're talking all things Russian collusion today because, well, that's what's in the news. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial because we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Stone Zone. You know, I wrote a book called Stone's Rules, which is kind of like Machiavelli's The Prince, or Sun Tzu's the Art of War. But these are the kind of the rules of the road, things that I learned in a 50-year career in the American political arena. But not everything in the book pertains to politics. These are really the rules for life. They tell you about business. They tell you about politics. They tell you about style and proper dressing for a gentleman. Really a collection of everything that I have learned in the public arena. But one thing that keeps coming up again and again on X, which used to be known as Twitter, I favor, old Savile Row style English tailoring, double-breasted suits, and particularly a wide-cut pleated trouser. No, they're not baggy, although some people keep saying that. The idea, of course, is that the silhouette of your suit, the jacket and the trouser are supposed to essentially lie in a straight line. It's aesthetically pleasing. Now, yes, I admit to you that not many men still wear the type of trouser that I wear. I always wear suspenders, which are actually known in Britain as braces, because a proper trouser begins at the shoulder, and they have to hang properly. But for those who keep saying that, well, Roger Stone's suit pants look baggy, you just don't get the aesthetic. I read a story on this in The Rake magazine recently. They get the aesthetic. Anyway, you might want to check it out, Stone's Rules. The U.S. Senate has now advanced the nomination of Joe Kent to head up the National Counterterrorism Center. The Senate voted to confirm Kent as director of the National Counterterrorism Center, getting Joe Kent one step closer towards serving in this important post under the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Kent has been attacked because he expressed the opinion, the correct one in my opinion, that the 2020 presidential election was stolen from President Trump. Kent has also said that the FBI played a role in the January 6th riot, which has been demonstrated as more and more footage from that day has been released to the public. Joe Kent's enemies have used these opinions as reasons why he should not be confirmed. But the real reason they oppose him vehemently is that Kent is a strong and credible advocate against foreign war and against the corruption of our intelligence agencies. Kent did 11 combat deployments as a Green Beret before joining the CIA. His wife Shannon was killed in 2019 by a suicide bomber in northern Syria. This caused Kent to re-question the necessity of endless war. He ran for Congress, a very noble effort, 2 times in Washington State, but Washington State is a state that has 100% mail-in ballots. That's right, there are no polling places. There are no voting machines. 100% mail-in ballots, which is why Republicans haven't won any races in the state of Washington in decades. So we will see when we go to a general confirmation vote in the U.S. Senate whether the nomination of Joe Kent gets sabotaged by those in the Republican establishment who would prefer to have a moderate Democrat that goes along with the military-industrial complex in office rather than a good man like Joe Kent. Kent now has an opportunity to serve this nation from a crucial role deep within the bureaucracy. Yes, he will give Gabbard the support she needs for the gargantuan task of fighting the deep state from within. Kamala Harris announced that she's not running for governor of California. The polls showed that she would have easily won that race. I think she's made a good decision. Richard Nixon made this mistake in 1962 after narrowly losing the presidency to John F. Kennedy in an effort to keep his presidential prospects alive. Nixon was talked into running for governor of the Golden State by President Dwight Eisenhower, New York Governor Tom Dewey, who had been the 1944 and 1948 Republican candidates for president. Nixon never had much interest in state issues. He was like a fish out of water, talking about the state school system and air pollution and other issues which he knew little as a federal official. Ultimately, the 1962 race would be a disastrous defeat, giving Nixon the reputation as a 2-time loser. It is only because of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, the assassination of Senator Robert F. Kennedy, the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, and the public disgust with the Vietnam War that the seas parted in such a way that Richard Nixon could make what was, up until then, the most incredible comeback in American political history. In this particular case, just because Harris is not running for governor of California does not mean that she's not running for president again. In a statement, former Vice President Harris said, "For now, my leadership in public service will not be in elected office. I look forward to getting back out and listening to the American people, helping elect Democrats across the nation who will fight fearlessly, and sharing more details in the months ahead about my own plans." I think she's running for president again. Once again, the polls show she would be the clear and strong front runner for the Democrat nomination. But I believe in a general election, she's damaged goods. The entire establishment united to prop her up and make her the candidate last time. Think about this. The people who were endlessly complaining about Donald Trump being a danger to democracy nominated their candidate for president in the most undemocratic way. In other words, Kamala Harris never had a single vote from a single Democrat primary or caucus voter. This was all done by the Obama machine. If you saw this recent interview with Hunter Biden, he was quite bitter about the fact that his father, Joe Biden's old friends, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, the Obamas, and the Clintons all got together to dump Joe. And then they anointed a candidate without any Democratic competition. She had the most money a campaign in the United States has ever spent. In fact, she outspent Donald Trump, but it was all for naught. Now, the Democrat Party and Kamala Harris are carrying enormous campaign debts that we all know will never, ever be paid off. I would like to see her run again because, frankly, I think she is imminently beatable. And within the context of the Democrat Party, she is still ideologically closer to the Ayatollah Zoran Mandami, AOC, Ilhan Omar, far left wing of the party that seems now to dominate the once great party of John F. Kennedy and Harry Truman. I would predict to you right now that if Kamala Harris runs, she's likely to be the Democrat nominee. And if I were the Republican nominee, well, I'd be praying for that. Meanwhile, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene has released her new legislation. It's called the Clear Skies Act of 2025, and it would ban the dangerous and deadly practice of weather modification and geoengineering, also known as chemtrails. If you live in the greater New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area, you've certainly seen the chemtrails in the skies. They're dangerous, and the idea of seeding clouds with toxic chemicals in order to control our weather, something that the government has been doing since the 60s, is under this bill a violation, a felony, punishable with up to 5 years in prison for each violation and fines of up to $100,000. The bill by my friend, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, is very similar to a law that was passed in Florida, which banned geoengineering and weather modification in that state. There's a growing impetus to do more about geoengineering, as these experiments have promulgated with little, if any, government oversight, and often completely unbeknownst to the public. We could have a pandemic of the skies, similar to the man-made engineered COVID pandemic, if these scientists err in their judgment. We can't allow this to happen. Other states must follow Florida, or we need to have this federal ban of geoengineering with significant criminal and civil penalties to end this dangerous practice. Robert F. Kennedy is now taking aims at the Vaccination Injury Compensation Program. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going after the corrupt Vaccination Injury Compensation Program that's been denying rightful compensation for individuals injured by Big Pharma's vaccines. The VICP, as it's known, was created under the 1986 National Childhood Vaccination Injury Act, which essentially has served to protect Big Pharma from injury claims over their vaccinations. In its 39 years in existence, the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program has only given $5.4 billion to about 12,000 victims. Big Pharma claims this is because of the safety of their products, but it is really because the fix is in to protect the pharmaceutical giants from paying claims to those that have violated, harmed, and in many cases killed. Senator Kennedy is not standing for this status quo. In an X post I noticed, RFK Jr. said, "The structure itself hobbles claimants. The defendant is not the Department of Health and Human Services, not the vaccination makers, and the claimants are therefore facing the monumental power and the bottomless pockets of the U.S. government represented by the Department of Justice. I will not allow this VICP board to continue to ignore its mandate and to fail its mission of quickly and fairly compensating vaccination-injured individuals." Once again, RFK Jr. is living up to his mandate to make America healthy again, and God bless him for it. And God bless President Donald Trump for having the courage to make RFK the HHS director. I think that this is a standout cabinet. When I went to Washington last week, I had an opportunity to meet privately with the Secretary of Treasury, Scott Bessent, who I think is among the president's very best nominees. He's a strong supporter of free markets. He's a strong supporter of low taxes, less regulation. He's a big defender and proponent for cryptocurrency. I think this is among the president's very best appointments. Then I must also tell you, I'm increasingly impressed with Marco Rubio. Now, Marco Rubio famously saw him in a video with Alex Jones in which he tried to claim that he didn't know who Jones was, but you'd have to be living under a rock not to know who Alex Jones is. Marco Rubio used to be thought of as kind of a neocon Republican in the Bush mold, but I think he's doing an outstanding job because he understands that his job as Secretary of State is not to implement his views or his ideas, but to implement the America First agenda as laid out by President Donald Trump. He's really emerging as one of the stronger members of the cabinet, and there are suggestions that he wants to run for president again, which is why I point out to you statements he made only days ago that he intends to support J.D. Vance, the vice president, who he describes as a good friend. So for those who are expecting to see a Vance-Marco Rubio competition, evidently that is surprisingly not in the cards. Marco Rubio certainly has the talent, the stature, and the standing, although in our party, sitting vice presidents like J.D. Vance, who I think is doing a great job, is clearly the front runner post-Trump for the Republican nomination, are rarely challenged. We believe in hegemony in our party. We believe in the natural order of things. After all, we nominated Bob Dole, who should have been nominated in 1988, as late as 1996, well after the good Senator Sell date. We even nominated John McCain after he had lost the nomination to George W. Bush. Why did we nominate him? Was it because he looked like a winner? No, we nominated him because it was his turn. And that's the way it goes in the Republican Party. So for those who already begin to fixate on 2028, the idea of a Marco Rubio candidacy got a dose of cold water from the man himself this week when he said he'll be supporting J.D. Vance. Had an opportunity to sit down with the vice president when I was in Washington, D.C., and I must tell you, I came away extraordinarily impressed. There's no question whatsoever that he has the poise and the stature and the knowledge and the courage to be president. That's why we elected him vice president. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Whatever you do, don't go away. We'll be right back in the zone with a little more of the hot political news.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Stone Zone. Having been through the meat grinder of the D.C. judicial system, I must tell you, I generally speaking have a very low opinion of lawyers. Most lawyers I have met have a goal of stretching out their client's case as long as humanly possible so they can continue to bill their client on an hourly basis. Most lawyers I've met are very concerned about being too aggressive at court because they worry about what the judge might think of them. See, they're always worried about the fact that they may have to go before the same judge with yet another client. Very few lawyers are committed to winning on behalf of their clients, particularly in a criminal defense setting. But whenever you read that so-and-so is a criminal defense lawyer, but you look at their biography and see that they were previously a federal prosecutor, well, I can generally tell you that's not the right lawyer. See, there's a big difference between being a federal prosecutor and being a criminal defense lawyer. Someone who's a former federal prosecutor begins their representation on the premise that their client is probably guilty and their job is to just get them the best possible deal. But a criminal defense lawyer is committed to winning at trial to prove that his client is innocent, even though technically under the law, the government has to prove you guilty rather than proving your innocence. That's why I think David Schoen, who represented President Donald Trump in the impeachment inquiry, could be the most brilliant attorney in the country. Last week, he dropped a legal nuke on the legacy of Barack Obama, declaring that the 44th President of the United States can still be impeached, and if he was impeached, he would then lose his post-presidential immunity and could therefore face indictment for criminal conduct tied to the Russian collusion hoax. You may have seen the clip recently where President Trump actually speculated that the recent Supreme Court decision regarding presidential immunity probably helped Obama in a substantial way. But now Schoen has added to the entire picture with this explosive revelation coming just days ago. Schoen just isn't letting Obama off the hook. Now, let's be very clear. It was during their second failed impeachment attempt against Trump that Democrats moved the goalposts. They're the ones who claimed that impeachment could apply even after a president leaves office. They did this in a desperate bid to disqualify Trump from running again, a tactic that came back to haunt them, to say the least, as the tsunami of lawfare that Donald Trump faced in state and federal courts backfired badly, and the president had the courage and the perseverance to fight his way to the greatest comeback in American political history. So David Schoen said that Trump was right when he said the immunity decision by the Supreme Court would help President Obama, but this impeachment dogma put forward by the Democrats, now hosted on their own petard, is most ironic. Schoen pointed out directly to Article 1, Section 3, Clause 7 of the Constitution, the very clause that the Democrats used during their second sham impeachment of President Trump to argue that a former president could still be tried and barred from holding office again. In doing so, they have inadvertently opened the door for the same standard to now apply to Barack Hussein Obama. All of their sphincters are puckering right now, folks, because they're all in the crosshairs. This is the greatest single dirty trick in American politics, an abuse of power in which the full legal authority of the United States government and the extraordinary capability of our intelligence agencies were weaponized in an effort to remove a duly elected president. The president said it way back in his interview with Leslie Stahl on CBS. They spied on my campaign and we caught them. We caught them red-handed. And indeed, thanks to the courage of Donald Trump and the authority he invested in the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, we now have the stone cold truth. Speaking of Tulsi Gabbard, she joins us tomorrow on the Stone Zone. You're not going to want to miss that. Until then, God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to the Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear the Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?
When you're having a baby, there's a lot on your mind. At Northwell's Staten Island University Hospital, you can rest easy with our reimagined labor and delivery experience. Our new Grapuso Women and Newborn Center provides private suites, overnight accommodations for a loved one, and a top-level NICU, all powered by the team that cares for the most moms and babies in New York. It's care made for Staten Island and made for you. Visit northwell.edu/newbaby. Staten Island University Hospital. Raise health.